Welcome back to the Golden Nugget podcast. Our hope is that for 1 hour each week, you feel encouraged and like you're sitting down talking to a few of your best friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you get our weekly episode updates and follow us on Instagram at the Golden Nugget Pod. Hello and welcome back to your favorite podcast, the Golden Nugget Podcast. I'm your host and your best friend, Anna Golden, and I'm here with a new one of your best friends, Paige Martindell. Did I say your last name right?
Yeah, Martindell.
Martindell.
I do a heavy on the Dell.
You're like, you said Dale?
You can say.
I've always said Dale.
I think it's kind of endearing. It's kind of cute.
I'm like, that was just my own interpretation. My sister just came bulldozing down the stairs. Are you wanting to be a live studio audience?
Hi, Skrilly.
Yeah. Anyway, I actually met Paige really because of Liz.
Yeah.
Because Liz started working with you in class. Okay,
Yes.
I'm jumping ahead of myself here. I'm going to formally introduce Paige so you guys can kind of know Paige is a jack of all trades. And I don't say that lightly. Like, she also is a business person, entrepreneur. She's an ambassador for Lululemon. She's co-owner and creative of Class Studios, which is a gym here that is honestly my favorite gym. I'm going back. I just told Paige, I was like, pump Orange Theory. Forget you guys. I'm back to I gotta go back to class.
Bringing her back in.
Got me back. And Paige is also a coach there. She's not only just owner, she's also coaches. Honestly, she also does design. My sister's off camera feeding me. I haven't gotten to all the things yet, but you teach all the different forms of like classes at Class Studios, right?
Yeah, we have about 11 classes and I'm teaching the majority of them, but not all.
Because tell me if I'm wrong, with Class Fitness, a lot of people teach one kind of fitness, right?
Correct.
Like
they can come in and
spin.
just teach sculpt or just teach cycle, but I love teaching so many different styles.
No, you're incredible at it.
Thank you.
Truly. And I also, Paige, did you once upon a time, maybe it still exists, did you do florals?
I did.
Because listen, the week before my wedding, when we planned my wedding a week before, I was like, Paige, could you do my bouquet? And she's like, of course, managing the gym. Also, we had a brand called Dallas Club. Is that still going on? I don't know. Shout out to anybody. I see people in the Dallas Club merch all the time. Do you?
We're trying to revive it. Literally resuscitating as we speak.
I think Enoch was wearing one of the shirts last night.
People they look really good in it. So.
I know. I almost just said the craziest thing, but I'm not going to say it.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's such a great thing. Anyway, you do all of these amazing things. Did you have a dream growing up? Or were you just like, I'm going to be everything I've ever wanted to be?
I dreamt of being a doctor.
Really?
When I was little.
You would have been an amazing doctor.
So I was like obsessed with the idea of being like a pediatrician or like neonatal.
Oh,
but look at me on the opposite side. God was like, whoop, other side.
I feel like with everything you do, though, you bring such a great presence. We're going to talk about, because Paige obviously loves the Lord, serves God, like met her in church, well, via Liz, because Liz worked at Class Studios for a while. Liz has lived a lot of lifetimes.
I say she's got 9 lives plus.
I know, literally. And like the time when Liz was helping manage a studio, it's like, what are we doing? Liz has never had a background in fitness. But I loved it. She did a great job.
It was amazing.
And then you guys became really close. So then I met you.
Yeah.
And then we just started hanging out a bunch.
Yes.
Dallas Club, all the things. And then also at church.
Yeah.
Which was so great.
There were so many intersections, which I love. And I think that's actually like the web of my life is like Truly. I usually know people by multiple areas. And I think that's such a blessing.
I literally, when I would say your name, I thought I was like the first person to know you at the church. And they're like, no, we all go to Paige's sculpt class at 5:30 on Wednesdays. And I'm like, I have rehearsal on Wednesdays. So I'm like, I never have gotten to go.
I feel left out.
I know, but everybody has great things. I've been to your other sculpts, but apparently that one's just, you know. Okay, so I wanted to start by talking about, like, when did you fall in love with the Lord? What's, like, your story of, like, meeting Jesus? Did you grow up here in Dallas?
No, I grew up in Kansas.
Kansas.
Yeah, I was born on the East Coast in Pennsylvania. Dorothy clicking her heels. But Topeka, Kansas is like home. Most of my family's in Kansas City because they've moved on up. Sure. But Topeka is where my parents live.
Okay.
Yeah.
How did you get to Dallas?
When I was graduating college, I graduated with a BFA in graphic design and marketing, and everyone had their jobs for like a year.
Sure.
The whole senior year. And I was the one that's like still interviewing. I wanted to move to California. I wanted to land with like a fashion company. So I actually was moved down here by Fossil headquarters. And I was a designer at Fossil for 2 years.
Did you love it?
I loved it so much. My creative director left after 2 years. And when he left, energy and culture completely shifted. Oh, okay. And I couldn't get behind feeling the way that I was treated. I didn't feel like it was right. And so I spread my wings and should we go there? Should we go to my 20s? Or should we reverse when I met Jesus?
Maybe do that and then go into your 20s. Because I want to know the whole genesis of like how you, because I think something is huge right now in culture is like deciding what you want to do.
Totally.
And what you've done is like what you said, you've like spread your wings in so many areas and you've soared in so many areas. I would say all of them. And so I'm just like, I love the example that you give of like chase your dreams, even do things outside of your major, like incorporate all of it. So I think it's so beautiful. Okay, start with Jesus.
Yeah, start with Jesus.
Jesus and then everything else. Amen.
Honestly, Young Life in middle school, I was really, really involved with like wildlife and Young Life. And I just had the most amazing 2 women over like my group. And Angelin and Candace, I'll never forget. I feel like they have like many kids. Their kids are in high school now, but like when they were in their young 20s, they were ministering to us and in a way that just felt so relatable and never judgmental, because I was a party girl in college or in high school, college, and I felt like I had different identities but was just so seeking the Lord and like what that looked like. Young Life was just a big moment for me to actually hear the gospel and know that it was for me instead of just hearing like it surrounded. I was never growing up in church. My parents are not religious.
Okay. How did you get there? This is always so fascinating to me because I was like through and through grew up in church.
Yes.
And it was like this kind of a way of life. But when you don't, like
the church I grew up in. Like every time I hear it, I'm like, I'm jealous, but I would never change my story.
Wow. Okay. So how did you even like want to be at a church service? Did you get invited?
When I was young, I was invited to like VBC, like the Vacation Bible churches. And there was like a haunted house and they like told you what hell would be like, and I just didn't want to go anymore. And so I actually like was not part of a church when I was they were scary. But then middle school, high school, it was just like the girls on the cheer squad invited me to go, and I was one of the youngest on the varsity team. And so being invited by the older girls to go to something like this, like, they made it so fun. I mean, there was like pizza parties and scavenger hunts and just all the things, but then it was so rooted in the gospel. So I loved getting to really dive in through Young Life, but then it was when I served at Young Life camps. Like I then was part of the serve team when I was in high school and into college. And so that's kind of where I met the Lord. I will say I was on a roller coaster with Jesus all throughout college and into like my early 20s. But when I was in college, I was always seeking a church. And in Lawrence, Kansas, where I went, there was just never like rooted community. Okay. So I did church bounce a little bit in college. And then when I moved to Dallas through Fossil bringing me down here and relocating me, I was like, man, the first thing I'm going to do is go to a church. And I church shopped for about 6 months and I found Shoreline eight and a half years ago. Wow. As of now, like almost 9 years ago.
That was like, we would have only been 3 years old at that time.
Baby.
3 or 4.
Yeah. It was the very first day in Garland Road. Like I walked into a building dedication and they had just come from a movie theater. Like I had no idea I was walking into such newness. And I was going through a breakup at the time and I sat down. Rachel puts her hands on me.
Of course. Rachel Tuttle. Shout out to the best.
Literally shout out to the angel that I needed in that moment. I was crying and I was alone and she saw me, prayed over me. And I looked at her and I was like, I literally have chills because I was never going to not go back. Yeah. It was my home from then on.
Wow. Yeah. I'm like, there's so many lessons to be taught just in like the beginning of your story to anyone who it's like, don't stop inviting people to church. Don't stop like finding the one person and praying over them. You have no idea the impact of like someone who never grew up in church. The cheerleaders were just the cool girls. Yeah. And they were like, come with us. They didn't make it weird. They didn't take you to that haunted house that at the end was like, are you going to heaven or hell? I grew up in stuff like that. It was scary. Like so scary. But okay, so then you're now moved here. Yeah. You started going to Shoreline. Yes. What was the transition of going from Fossil to like Class Studios?
When I was at Fossil, I was there for the 1.5 to 2 years, and I loved being in corporate fashion design. Like it really was so cool to go from school to that because it's kind of like a dream come true. Sure. But I was a junior designer, very much production. So just kind of like editing files, never getting really to create. And that's okay. I get what climbing the ladder feels like. But when I started finding fitness in Dallas, I found fitness and I was, long story short, I started coaching cycle classes because I had such a big background in cheerleading and instruction through cheerleading. Okay. And I led cheer camps in college. So I was used to being on a mic and encouraging, but I never like turned that into a fitness passion.
Did you decide to do that? Or did someone see that on you? Or were you were like, oh, I'm going to start teaching a class?
Yeah. So I was at Fossil, and I knew I just wanted a workout community. So there was this app called Studio Hop, and it's like ClassPass today. It's still a competitor. And I was working out using the app. So I was just going around to different studios. I'm 21, 22 years old, and I find this cycle studio called the Ride House. So I'm just taking all my credits into that one studio. I'm taking all these classes. I'm there for 6 months, and I have this like call on my heart where it's like, you're supposed to be teaching here, but I was so young that I was embarrassed to ask. And I ended up going to the manager, and I was like, hey, I really think I'm supposed to teach here. And then she looked up and was like, I was waiting for you to ask. Wow. And from that moment on, I was like, man, I need to be more bolder about my asks, even if it's a no. And so I was trained. I started teaching. So I would teach at 5:30 a.m., go and work at Fossil, and then work on my freelance at night because I was always doing freelance projects.
Yeah, like creative projects, design, graphics, all
Yes. And so I did that for a bit. But when I was a Studio Hop client, then they reached out like, hey, we need your creative skill set on our app. So I left Fossil to work for Studio Hop.
No way. Did that just feel like kind of a dream because you loved your side of fitness, and then you got to have your creative outlet, so they were married?
It was the first time that my passions were blending.
And I kind of felt like fitness?
I did. I was a competitive gymnast and a cheerleader my entire life. Like I literally grew up in the gym. My older sister was an incredible gymnast, and I would say I was pretty talented too.
This was my story. She's like, I grew up in the gym. I'm like, meanwhile,
literally,
I grew up in church.
My tiny little ones, or like my leotards, are like this big. That's how I started when I was a baby. Like the first thing when you're 3, you learn a cartwheel.
Sure.
And I was just flipping.
I did I did tumbling when I was young. I was too tall. I grew out of it, and they're like, you can't be great at this. So I was like, I'm pivoting.
You do have to dedicate your whole life to it, or my older sister was who I looked up to the most. So I was just around gymnastics my whole life. And I just feel like God has always spoken like fitness and faith over me together. And I'm like, what the heck? Here I am now.
That's amazing. Okay. So then from Studio Hop, how did you get into class? You met Jazz?
Yeah. Jazz was the manager at the Ride House where I was teaching cycle.
No way.
So when she and I were working together, I was just an instructor. She knew that her cap had come by working at Ride House and was ready for her next step. And she knew like what I had skill set wise and that it was different from her. And she was like, man, this could be a really cool partnership. And she said, hey, I'm opening up a studio and I like want you to do it with me. And so I designed the class logo in like a week because she had to start putting like marketing stuff together.
Yeah.
And so I was still at Studio Hop opening up class studios, and I talked to my boss at Studio Hop and I just said, hey, I love you and I'm so honored by all of the opportunities that you've given me, but it's time for me to like step in bigger into a fitness studio realm. And so that was 7.5 years ago.
That's amazing. What was y'all's vision for class studios? Because for those who don't know what this, class-based fitness, normally you go to a gym like a Soul Cycle and they do Soul Cycle like cycle classes.
Yep.
Or you go somewhere like a Core Power Yoga or a Pilates and they just have one thing.
Yes.
Class has, how many did you say? 11?
Yeah, we have like 11 class styles. We were always rooted on our 5. Okay, so reversing a little bit, when Jasmine was like, hey, I really want to open up a studio that is cross-training and like dimensional.
Yeah.
Because no one had done it yet, but her and I loved to do it. So we were
that's like why people have Class Pass.
Exactly.
Because you want to go to a different kind of workout.
Yes. Her and I were just teaching cycle, but we had this like drive to do a sculpt Pilates class. So we had this guy that we really wanted to partner with, and the very first class studios was supposed to be cycle plus sculpt. Turns out he moves out of Dallas, and we're like, maybe it should be this like train boot camp style class. So we found our favorite trainers that do that, partnered with them, and it was cycle plus train. After a year and a half, it was already just booming. Like classes waitlisted. It was like we were creating this community that we had always craved and thought that we could. And that's when we opened up our second studio that's now sculpt, tread, meditation, yoga, and dance.
Wow. I didn't even know you guys had a dance. Is dance new?
Yeah, it is new.
Oh, wow.
It's called Studio. You'll have to come take it.
Oh my gosh. I probably would be so crazy in there.
It's only like up to like a 16 count. It's not, it's nothing crazy. It's just
like
full. You come in and it's rehearsed.
Routine.
It's
2, 3, 4. I'm like,
and you have no idea what's going on. No, we would never leave you in the dark. Yeah.
No, I have had like my background with fitness. Like, you have a fitness background? Yeah, okay.
You do.
I grew up
and I weightlifting.
Yeah, I did like powerlifting, all the things. Enoch was asking me the other day. He's like, "Why did you do that?" I was like, "I was dating a guy who did it." Okay, it's like what you did.
Yeah.
And so I got really into like lifting heavy, and just like my experience with the gym was really strenuous on my body.
Yeah.
And then like growing up in the entertainment industry, just having like trainers, and it was just like all about like what's on the
aesthetics.
Scale. Yeah, never about how you felt.
Totally.
But I loved being strong. So it was like really different. And I would say that like class, because I had lost quite a bit of weight last year, and class was really like the pendulum for me with that, like just like going to classes and like falling back in love with just like movement at all, to like it was like my gateway drug back into like actually liking to work out. I'm like, that's why I need to go back, because I need to get back into it.
I just think we're raised to feel like it has to be this punishment, and everything that we wanted to do at class, and everyone that works there just wants it to feel good.
Exactly. To be excited. When I was like 16 and I had my first personal trainer, I on the way would have like anxiety attacks, because I'm like, she's so stressful for me.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I love sculpt classes particularly, because it was like, you go in there, you kick off your shoes, so you're barefoot, which I love, which makes it feel like less of a workout to me, because it's like, oh, this, you know what I mean? Yes. Like it just makes it feel so much more fun. You have your mat, you're gonna get a good sweat because the room is hot, and then like the movements. And I will say something that you do so well is you make the class so fun, and you push everybody in a way that they want to push themselves, opposed to like, I remember one time, and I went to Barry's boot camp class one time, and this was like in my peak physical condition, okay? I'd probably go in now and probably have a heart attack. But I went in, and the guy was just hounding me the whole time. I think it's just their style, you know? And he was like, come on, you got to get the treadmill to 12. I'm like, I've never gotten the treadmill to 12. And there's like the belts that you like push it.
Yeah.
So it's like you don't set it, you have to run that. And I was just like, I remember I left and I cried. And I was like, I did not like that experience, but I loved at class, you guys push each other in such a healthy way.
Yeah.
And something I wanted to, because our listeners ask this all the time, because obviously like Kayla, Enoch, and I, we all work in full-time vocational ministry. Every person who loves the Lord is called to ministry in their own right. And I think that sometimes we kind of lock it into vocational ministry of like, oh, I have to get my paycheck from a church, or I need to be a pastor, or whatever that looks like. But ministry is in all different facets. I had my dad on the podcast, and he was talking about like his chiropractic journey, and he was like, it was healing hands.
Wow.
Like when I'd put my hands on people, I'd pray for them. And so I love the merging of it all. And when you do, I remember when I first brought your name up to some girls at the church, they're like, man, Judy Brown, she was like, Paige is so special. What she does at those classes is so special. And how she like ushers in the presence of the Lord. Now, Paige isn't like, all right, everybody, we're all going to speak in tongues for a second. It's like, no, that's not, like, she's in a like secular space to where most of the people there aren't like saved, and it's just going to be random people all the time.
Yeah.
But what you have in your countenance, and you carry the presence of God everywhere you go, and it's just like so powerful. I want to know, like, what does that look like in your life of, you don't work in ministry, but what you do, you see it as a way to reach people and to minister to them.
Yeah.
Did you learn that, or did like...
I want to tell you a really quick story that I'm not even sure if Onika will remember.
Okay,
this was
please.
The turning point when class was about to open.
Okay.
I think we had opened, but I hadn't taken on ownership. It was like a year in, and I really wanted to like put blood, sweat, tears in to like prove myself to Jasmine. And, you know, I was so young. But I remember there was this opening at Shoreline for a creative position, mostly graphic design. And I inquired about it because Lauren Packer Scott was in that position, and she was getting married and kind of transitioning out. Yeah. And so I was thinking about applying, and I just remember sitting down with Onika and us feeling like my ministry actually wasn't in the church.
Wow.
And I think she spoke that over me, because I thought that maybe that's what I had to do to like use my talent.
Be more connected and like feel like you're making a difference.
And I was like, oh, it's on the screen. They need a graphic designer. Like, why wouldn't I?
Sure.
And I think that's when I made the turning point to be like, but I feel so called into fitness. Can be a very dark industry. Like you just said, it's about like the way you look, and it's about the numbers on the scale. And I think, thank goodness, we're getting out of that quite a bit. But at the time, I felt really called into that. And I said, I'm going to step in so fully. And we were still doing construction over the West Village studio. Wasn't open. Literally would go in and like run my hands along the walls and pray.
Wow.
And I just felt like I was stepping into something scary, but I knew that God had it. And so, no, I never knew that that was going to be my path, but I've always felt now that I know if I'm plugged into church, I can just be a channel for everything that I learn, everything that I hear, and everything that I'm able to absorb, and then use it on my microphone.
That's so great. I think that it's something too, like how you say you kind of got like fully bought in when you were in your 20s.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes too, when it happens later in life, I see this happen so many times for people. It's like they get saved in their late 20s or something, and they're like, now I got to go work at the church.
Yes.
Or like, I got to go to Bible school. And I love like wanting the knowledge. I love that.
Yeah.
But there is an element to like going into all the world and preaching the gospel. It's just the word.
Totally.
And it's like having those different facets of space. And I've met countless people who you have sent to our church. And I'm like, my sister makes this joke all the time because my sister's, you know, she's in and out of everything. But she's like, I've sent so many people to the church at Class Studios.
It's true.
And I was like, Liz, that's hilarious. Let's have you come. But all that to say, I'm like, that is such a platform for people. And something that's so huge is like the way that you live your life is going to be the biggest testimony before you say anything.
Totally.
So it's like when people come in, walk in your class, your countenance is high. I mean, like, I think of like the era that we're in, like the era the economy's in. We're currently in like the election time and all of these things. And it gives every person an excuse to come in heavy.
Totally.
But to be greeted with someone who's like, you're so positive, you're so upbeat, you're choosing to have a smile on your face, that's when people are like, why are you like that?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Totally.
That's the inquiry. To live a beautiful life is the best testimony you can have before it leaves your lips.
Yeah.
Because it really encourages people to be like, hey, what do you have going on? Like, why are you so positive? Like, why aren't you like pushing us in a way that feels like negative? You're actually like encouraging us. So I like love what you do so much.
Thank you.
And what you do also is you still partner with the church. You've led a Girls Connect group forever.
18 years straight.
I know, I love it. I'm like, if there's one thing I know Paige is meeting with these girls, okay? But I love that. Like, you have such a full life. You travel to and experience so many other fitness cultures. You guys got to follow Paige on Instagram. It's honestly like following one of those like adventure pages. I'm like, where were you over like you were just somewhere place and you were like, this has been my dream. It was a couple days. It was.
Yeah. I did Portugal and then Bali back to back.
Yeah. Insane. I mean, and like it was so curated and you're like, this is one of the best fitness experiences. Paige goes on fitness vacations.
I do, but let me tell you, a sister needs to slow down, which I am. I think once you travel like X amount of days of the year, you're just ready for routine. And it actually made me just crave being back in the house, like being back at church.
Totally.
Because you can watch online and it's beautiful and it's a great resource, but until you're like back in it, I literally just cried walking into the building a couple weeks ago because I hadn't been in months, you know? So
you've been everywhere.
Yeah.
But I do love something that you said, though, is like you've kept online. You still keep up with your girls.
Yeah.
Even in seasons where you're traveling, you come back, you serve, you get your Connect group back up.
Yeah.
What does that look like? We've gotten this question so much of like, okay, I have a full life. I have a full family. You're married. You have your little fur babies.
Yeah.
And you're obviously running a business, doing so many millions of side projects. If Paige is always doing a side project and balancing all these things, how do you still make church a priority? And why did you make church a priority? Because you didn't even see that modeled growing up.
Yeah. What's so beautiful when you did say that last sentence, though, is that my little sister is in ministry with her husband in Kansas City. And so Blair and I are believers in our family, and I feel like she's a rock without even having to be here. So we are really, really spiritually and just like energetically connected every day we talk. And now that she's got little kids, it's like I want to be there for them. So she's definitely an anchor for me in faith. Mm-hmm. But then the way that I've met my girlfriends that I feel like God has just dropped these angels into my life, right? The chosen family that we get to have. They work at Class Studios and they go to church. And I just feel like church for me isn't just walking into a body of people I don't know. Like it literally is a homecoming every time.
Beautiful.
And so I have considered, Scott and I have considered, like, what would it look like in the coming years to call a different state home? Like, we're always thinking, like, what would our next chapter be like?
Totally.
But leaving the church is like one of the reasons why I haven't. It is literally one of the greatest places that I know. And I don't just say that to say that. It's like actually saved me over and over again. And the people in it have, even if I'm gone for months at a time, Tass is like, can I save you a seat? And she probably knows I'm traveling, but it's still there. And it's really sweet. So yeah, even when I'm away, I just feel like my relationships to the women in my life have really been the biggest thing. They cheer me on. They fight for me. My best friend, Haley, has 2 kids. We're in completely different seasons, but we're like, church, save you a seat, save you a seat. And it's like, it's just the highlight of my week if I get to worship next to her.
Man, that's so special. And I love the positivity around church. There's sometimes, I mean, I talk about this all the time. There's just... If you grew up somewhere, it's just like anything. If you have a ton of history with something over time, accrues hurt, disappointment, or you tie all these negative emotions to it. And I mean, you've been in church how many years now?
Like at least 11 or 12.
And I'm sure you even have stories of like,
totally,
like this person offended me, this person hurt me. I questioned going back to church here. Like that is just like the natural progression. But I love how you talk about it as it is still such a life-giving thing. Like in scripture, the Lord still puts so much demand on his church and just love, and that's who his bride is. And that's where I'm like, I love keeping that as a forefront, even if you're like, okay, what if we moved? What would that look like? And it's like, no, we still want to, even if we do move, this is going to be a huge core value of our family. That we're going to build our life on this. And it really is that like chosen family that you get. Totally. And I want to talk about too, like you built some of your own community by starting your own group and like all of those things. I think that sometimes people go into church and like, okay, I don't know how, like our church is really great with community. I'll say that 100%. Amazing. But it's like for those people who are like, okay, well, I'm at church. It's like hard to find community. I'm like, start a group. Okay. So for those of our listeners who are in a church and they're like, okay, I don't feel like community is maybe not the thing that our church is nailing. How did you find your own community, even within like, because you started a group? Was it because you knew some girls or did you want to get to know girls?
Yeah, I knew I had girls from different pockets of my life. Sure. And I was like, what would happen if I brought them together?
Did they all go to the church or
no?
Wow.
So Haley and I knew I wanted to lead with Haley because I was like, how cool would it be if I led with my best friend? But it is at my home and I love hosting. And so I knew that she knew people craving female connection in a way that was like, we're not going to just do a season. We're going to do like years. Yeah. So it was kind of in it from the long haul. But then I pulled girls from fitness, from different sides that were craving community. And I would say all of our walks are on this big spectrum of like walking so tightly knit with the Lord to like knowing and loving, but not walking closely.
Just different ways of life, everybody.
And I think we met, our first year was so impactful because what we would look around, whether it was tears or belly laughs, being like, we are all teaching each other something and we're all vastly, vastly different. Like some have kids, some are just married, some are single, and we all have different occupations. Like if you look at the gamut of what's going on in that group, you're like, actually, how are you friends and how are you together?
You're like, what's connecting you guys?
And I think that's so cool. And just to this day, I think we're coming up on year 3. We've seen marriages. Yeah. We've seen births. We've seen almost divorces. Sure. We've seen grief. We've seen, it's been just all a ride.
Something you said, I want to know if this is true for you, because I feel like for myself, there are moments in life where I'll just get like derailed or like lose sight and be like, my first instinct sometimes is to retreat. Totally. And it's like, let me cancel my group this week, or like, do you know what I mean? And I had Irene Rollins on with her husband before, and she was talking about in recovery, because she's a former alcoholic. Yeah. In recovery, they say share it to keep it. And it's like, that's when you start mentoring others, is when you get to keep your sobriety, because you're actually sharing your own sobriety. Yeah. And I think even with like what you're saying, like you're like, okay, there's some girls on the walk who've like so close to Jesus, been walking with him their whole life. And then there's some girls who just met him. And I'm like, for those, it's actually for those who of us have been walking with the Lord for a long time, it helps us keep close to that, bringing people on the journey who it's brand new to them.
Totally.
Because it's like, man, I'm sharing something that I love so much with you that sometimes it can kind of get old for me if I let it get old, but it's like constantly a refresh. Yeah. So it like helps sometimes we think when we're hosting a group, it's for a lot of the other girls, when actually so much of it is for us.
Oh my gosh.
Like when you're saying like y'all walk through grief, y'all walk through life being life together. How have you seen that like fill you up in your own life, being able to give it away?
Yeah. Ooh, I'm going to go deep for a second.
Please.
Scott and I were in a season where marriage was just like really, really scary and really sad. And he had actually left the house. Like he wasn't living in our house for a while. We were like, from our therapist, she was like, what does like temporary separation look like? So he had gotten an Airbnb a couple weeks. Like we literally were just like, are we going to save this or not? And we need space to try to figure that out. So he literally wasn't living in our house, and I had group on a Tuesday night, and everything in me was like, cancel. Like you can't just show up and lead when you have nothing to give. And I remember no one knew either. I was keeping it so secret. Like I just was so nervous to talk about my marriage basically failing. And so I'm sitting there and I'm like, putting on a happy face and leading this group, and we had it, and like we do a circle share, and it had come to me and I lost it. And it was the first time that I like told them how bad it was. And they were there to cry with me and to hold me and to speak life into me. And I just remember I was like, man, you can just be so scared of the things that you're about to say, and then to have a softer place to land and actually just like have life spoken into you. And it wasn't that they were trying to fix it or like calling Scott or anything. It was just like being in it with me. But it was for somebody of my personality type to show
vulnerability.
Yeah. And just to like cry. I don't like love crying with people.
I share that.
Yeah.
First of all, thank you so much for your vulnerability, because that just creates so much healing and openness, not even for yourself, but for other people.
Yeah.
And I am one of those people too, that like after I have like an emotional dump, I'll be like back and I'm like, oh, that was so embarrassing. Yeah. I'm like, why did he do that? And then I'm like beating myself up about it. And it's like, no, you're such a strong person. Yeah. But in that moment, you've created such a culture in even like opening up your home to where it's been a safe place for so many other girls. They got an opportunity to be the safe place for you. Yeah. I literally back to like Irene's story that we talked about. They were pastors when she was going to rehab, and they kept everything a secret. Yeah. We talked about this on a podcast a few ago, and Kayla actually said her love towards the church was because the church's response when they finally came out about it.
Ooh, yeah.
How loving they were.
Wow.
And how they all accepted her. And she's like, everybody roared in that room. Ooh. And I was like, man, it's the very thing that we talk ourselves up to being like, that's going to be, which is such the enemy of like, people are going to turn on you. Yeah. Like that's, if you share that, it's not going to be okay. And it's like, man, to be met with healing on the other side of it. Yeah. And in scripture, it talks about like confessing your sins to the Lord. That's what brings forgiveness, but confessing your sins to one another is what brings healing and like freedom. Cause it's no longer a burden that you're carrying on your own. And I think that community, we weren't meant to go through life alone. We weren't meant to hold on to all these things and to create that healthy space of girls who not only will hold the things for you and with you and listen and not try to just fix it and pray with you and like sit with you in it. Like to feel like I feel so honored that I have the girls that I have around me, because it can be like, life is crazy. Send a text. My aunt passed away recently, and it's been, just really crazy. Totally. And just to see like all the flowers people sent, or like meals people wanted to drop off, and just like, we're praying for you. We're here in it with you. What can we help take off your plate? So beautiful. And I'm like, that's truly what community was designed for. Yeah. And I think that we're in such a cyber age of feeling like we have these fake dopamine hits of community because we see people through a screen. And even like what you're saying of like when you were traveling, you're like, church online, it was great to keep connected and I'm up to date on all the things, but being back in the building,
unreal.
What would you say to those who were kind of pivoting a little bit in ministry, who are like, man, life got busy after COVID. I kind of tune in on Sunday mornings, but I don't really want to go back to the building. I don't think there's a need for it. What would you say to those who are like in the marketplace and are like, my life's busy enough as it is. I don't want to go somewhere on Sundays. Where's the value in that to you when you walk through the doors?
Yeah, I mean, it was a huge game changer, because I feel like I knew that it filled me up online and it's beautiful and I can worship in my car. And, I have all these like solo practices.
Sure.
But until you're like actually energetically connected, I mean, Earl talked about it maybe a year or two ago, how the redwood trees like literally root touch. Like what we see is a singular tree, but underneath they're like so intertwined.
Great, Paige.
And I talk about that all the time in my classes. It's like, yeah, you can just show up and sit on a bike and cycle for 45 minutes and then leave and you'll still feel good. But did you get to know your neighbor and like maybe have a connection there that then you can go grab a cup of coffee after?
This is great.
And so I don't know. I think you don't know it until you feel it. But when you feel it, you want more of it. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things. It's like you can live a very solo life and it can still be in fear of God and like loving the Lord. But it gets so much better.
Yeah. It's so much more fun.
Yeah.
And happier and lighter because people are designed to help make the journey easier and better. And it's like God created us all so different so we could carry different things and need each other.
And I do think people maybe are apprehensive about going back to buildings because of things that they're carrying. And I was like, man, are people going to ask where Scott is? Or like, you know, just like using my marriage as an example. But I couldn't let my pride and ego get in the way of what God had for me there. So
that's so good.
Yeah.
It's so real to want to conceal those things, especially in church. I think that's like, I would say like the poster of what we thought church should be. It's like a bunch of perfect people getting together and it's like, hallelujah. You know what I mean? And it's like everybody's perfect and goes back to their perfect lives.
I cry every church.
I know. And it's like, that's where it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be a place where we get to go fall apart and we get to get filled up and then we get to bring other people on the journey. And it's just an endless cycle of like, okay, everybody's on the struggle bus. You go through a rotation of it. And it's like you go through strength. Something happens in life and then you're back on that. And then you need those people who are on their strength part of their cycle to help get you. And it's just like helping people carry other people. And I love how you use the example of fitness because it is like when you're only doing it by yourself.
Like, you're not going to go as hard.
I know.
That's
I'm like,
sure.
You're not pushing yourself as hard. I'll say that. Me on a bike in a cycle class is like spinning it. Me by myself in the gym's like, man, I'm great at this.
La-di-da. Joyride.
I know, truly.
Yeah.
And I think that it's like that with your faith too.
Yeah.
It's like you can be accountable or you can do it on your own. And I think the accountable side, it builds your strength so much more.
Yeah.
And so tying all the faith to fitness, I love how you said that you have just always had a mind for combining those. What was your heart behind that?
I just feel like when you're working out, you're at one of your most vulnerable states, right? Like you're physically exhausted, you're mentally and emotionally exhausted. And that's when life needs to be spoken to you. And it was your aim earlier. It's like you can get coaching that's kind of toxic and negative, or you can get literal life spoken over you. And I'm not saying that I'm wonderful at that, but I try my best to be that.
You are pretty wonderful at that.
Thank you. I know that you hate it, but I have played your music at the end of my classes. And I think that that's one of my favorite things is that I get to bring my perspective and artists that love the Lord into my classes. And I don't do like Christian-based classes, but I do get requested to do them all the time.
I know.
All the time.
I feel like we should do one.
Yeah.
I think we should do one.
Just a pop-up, a Sunday afternoon or like an evening.
Oh my gosh.
It'd be so powerful.
First of all,
can
all
I put you on the
nuggets,
mic?
Yeah. Are you kidding me? First of all, I need to do at least 15 classes before we do this.
You're singing the entire class.
They're like, has she ever taken this class? Like, what is going on? No, I mean, I feel like we would fill it up immediately.
Yeah. Waitlisted for sure.
No, totally. I think that that's just something so beautiful that the Lord talks about our body being our temple. Like this is an area that I've struggled in my life and just having that toxic relationship with my body.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's something that the Lord wants to heal and unite it because it is our vessel. And you realize that like the better you feel internally, it helps. Like now they say that our gut is like our second brain.
I know.
Which mental health issues, tying in all the things that like scripture says about like gratitude. And you guys walk through that in your class of like being thankful, being present, being in your body. And I think that the combination of all those things and even like what you're saying, like I've definitely been in one of your classes where you've ended in like peace, which I think is so special. That song the Lord gave me during an anxiety attack and has crossed boundaries of religion.
the way that some of the clients have said, I just cried so hard to you playing that. And I know that you hear this all the time, but I hope it's not lost on you. It's just like the second that song starts, there's this like just level of peace, obviously. But for them to be able to hear maybe those words for the first time.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Totally. And I thank you so much for saying that. That song continues to blow me away.
Yeah.
Of all me girls, I like my old hairstylist in Las Vegas. She'd be like, it was just a perfect breakup song. And I was like, wow, I love that that's what connected you to it. Because you don't realize that when you're listening to that song, if you know it or not, we're talking about the Lord.
Yeah.
Like we're talking about the peace of God that surpasses understanding. So when you're in that gap of like, what's going on? Why does this look the way that it looks?
Exactly.
I'm so anxious. That's when the Lord injects his peace.
Yeah.
And it's just basically what y'all are doing with your class too, of like, yeah, people are going in there, they don't understand, maybe like, okay, we're going to practice gratitude. In scripture, it says to always enter his courts with thanksgiving and his gates with praise, because the shift of perspective when your heart goes into gratitude, it actually chases out all the anxiety in your brain. The way that like our physiological self lines up so much with our spiritual self, and scripture gives us a roadmap for it.
You're on one, and I love it.
And it's so just good. But it's so real. Of like, we think everything's compartmentalized. And it's like, no, man, like the way that our bodies are designed to heal themselves if they were cut, like the Lord intricately made our bodies as such a beautiful work of art that's connected to our spiritual self too. And like, I love how you tie all those in and just help people get back into their bodies, help people grow in their faith even while they're working out. Faith and fitness, I love it.
It really, I mean, like you kind of think that they would live so separately, but I've just seen so evidently the power that they have together.
Man, I wanted to ask you, just like kind of pivot a little bit and before we wrap. So you do all these amazing things. Like you are great at a lot of things. How did you get to the place where you didn't feel like you had to choose one?
Oof.
You know what I mean?
I think it was lives lived before me. Like, I just think I needed to see that people could be multidimensional.
Yeah, it's good.
And maybe just the support of like loving parents that were like, okay, we're a little bit nervous about
like, go for it, Paige.
Where she's going to go with this. And then also Scott, like to have a cheerleader that's like, you're going to start a clothing brand. Okay.
We're bringing it back. Bring back the Dallas Club.
And the flower thing, and just to touch on flowers for a second, was my studios had closed. It was 2020.
Yeah.
And I wanted to do something with my hands because I felt like as a designer, I'm constantly looking at screens and I was like, what does it look like? I've always been obsessed with flowers, to just like literally get my hands dirty. And so I would just like do like special orders and bless people with flowers during one of the darkest years of all of our lives.
Wow.
That could have been the darkest. And so since then, definitely closed the door on flowers. I am much more of a digital heartbeat. I thrive there. But it was a season where I felt called into it, and I led floral classes, which was really fun because it was just getting girls together. That was really like what it was for.
Paige, you're incredible.
Thank you.
I love that you're like, during COVID, I decided I wanted to do this, and then I was teaching courses on it. It's like, not only were you like into it and you like loved doing it, you were teaching others to do it,
which I was not qualified for. But it's like,
you're such a great teacher that you tell me to do anything in a floral class, I'm like, yes, this stem here.
I had watched so many YouTube videos from so many florists that I admired, and then you like pair it with a glass rosé and your girlfriend's. I mean, like, what's better?
No,
does the arrangement look amazing? Maybe not.
It's like the wine and paint night. It's like, are any of us hanging those?
Yeah, never.
We're having a ball.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
No, I love that. And I love too how you're saying, like, in COVID, like all this class, did you get scared for fitness? Like, genuinely, were you kind of scared for class fitness?
So nervous. I had to like really elevate my faith in that season, because I actually thought everything that I had worked for was going out the door.
No, yeah. I mean, we thought that in the entertainment industry of like, yes, people were consuming what we create, but we thought like touring was done. Yep. Live shows were over. I mean, you literally thought we weren't going to have like flying on planes without masks anymore. Yes. People kind of reclused. I mean, there's still so much of people that are still kind of going through counseling, getting through like, it was a really traumatic time. So what you're saying of like, okay, that happened,
And fitness was individual, right? Because everyone was getting like the mirror and the Peloton. And I love that there were options. We like went online and had our classes online. But to then have these giants create these opportunities for people to work out alone was scary, but it's exactly what we went back to. It's like you can be great. You can be good singularly and then great with people. So they notice that in their bodies. They're like, okay, I can train alone, but does it feel as good? And so that's when we started seeing the rush of people come back.
Man, but I love too that like even when you didn't know what the future was going to look like there, you pivoted and you started doing flowers. And I'm like, that's so beautiful. Yeah. I'm like, you could have totally been like, like that.
I was craving human connection. So I was like, what's this going to look like?
You're like, how are we going to figure this out?
It's going to be flowers.
Man. Paige, your spirit is so beautiful, and like your joy that you carry into every room. I'm just so grateful that you wanted to come and be on this podcast today.
Text, I saw the text in my, literally this big. This is how big I smiled.
No, I'm like, you.
And to just sit down with you. We haven't ever really just sat down and like.
I know. It has been such a minute.
Yes.
I'm like, I'm truly, I said this on a few podcasts ago, but I'm really fighting for right now just spaces of like being more present, because it's been a lot of like getting married, going through all these things.
Beautiful things.
We've moved twice.
Lots
since
of
we've gotten married, which is amazing. And I'm like just trying to find the small moments of like, oh man, locking eyes with people, getting to do all the things and managing them all. But we're so grateful. Thank you so much for being on this. You have so much wisdom.
Thank you so much.
Of course, love to have you again. Maybe we'll do like a Golden Nugget pop-up class. That would be so fun.
We're talking all the things, and just to have you back in the sculpt classes.
I know. I'm
gonna embarrass you.
That's step one. Let's get me back in there.
I'm gonna embarrass you and keep playing your music.
I need to do it. I need to do it. Sorry guys at Orange Theory, it had to change for me. I like the orange lights. They're giving me migraine. Gotta go. I'm back. Well, I love you so much.
I love you too.
Thank you so much for being on.
Of course.
We love each of you so much. We hope for the last 45 minutes to an hour that you felt encouraged, that you felt pushed forward, that you felt like you have people in your corner. Please let us know in the comments any moments that spoke to you. Follow us, like, subscribe, do all the things. Share this with a friend, especially if you have friends who are in that tension of like, man, is what I'm doing actually ministry? Am I pushing the kingdom forward? I think that this would be such a great conversation for them to listen to. We love you guys so much. Have a great rest of your week. See you next week. Bye.
Bye.